All right, let's dive into what might be the single most important and maybe most dangerous relationship in business today. We're talking about Apple and China, a truly multi-trillion-dollar entanglement.
So let's just kick things off with this statement. It sounds like a total exaggeration, right? China made Apple and Apple made China. I mean, it's a huge claim, but stick with me because what we're about to uncover is, well, it's even more dramatic than it sounds.
So you're probably thinking, an exaggeration? Okay, fine. Let me throw one single, absolutely staggering number at you. This one number, it puts the whole thing into perspective.
$55 billion. That's what Apple poured into China in 2015 alone. Now, to give you some context here, the entire US CHIPS Act, this massive government plan to bring semiconductor manufacturing back to America, that was $52 billion spread out over 4 years. Apple spent more than a whole government initiative in a single year in a single country. So how on earth did we get here? To figure that out, you really have to go back and see just how desperate Apple was.
So let's hop in the time machine and go back to the mid-90s. And I want you to forget everything you know about Apple today. Forget the iPhone, forget the trillion-dollar valuation. Because the Apple we're talking about was on the absolute brink of bankruptcy. Like total collapse. You could literally feel the desperation. Picture this, March 1996. An Apple exec is trying to close a late-night deal to sell off the company's last major factory in the US. His boss calls him up and says, and I'm paraphrasing here, if you don't close this deal tonight, no one gets a paycheck at the end of the week. This wasn't about chasing higher profits anymore. This was pure survival. They had to make a huge shift. Stop making their own products and just find someone, anyone, who could assemble them. And that search, well, it ended in one place, China.
And when Apple got to China, they didn't just find some factory to do their bidding. Oh no, they found a partner, a company called Foxconn. And the deal they struck, it wasn't just any deal. It was a bargain that would literally change the face of global manufacturing forever.
Look, this was so much more than just finding cheap labor. You have to understand, Apple gave Foxconn everything. I'm talking their best engineers living on site, teaching people from the ground up. Apple bought billions of dollars worth of advanced machinery and then flew their own people in to install it. Over the years, they ended up training something like 28 million Chinese workers. They basically built the skilled workforce that would go on to power China's entire tech industry.
So what did Apple get in return for all this? Well, they got two things. Absolute control and rock-bottom prices. And this chart just says it all. Look at this. Apple squeezed Foxconn's profit margin from over 10% all the way down to a measly 2.4%. And while that was happening, Apple's profits went through the roof. Get this, Foxconn even took on all the risk. If you returned your iPhone for any reason, Foxconn had to eat the cost and replace it. It was a brutal deal, but for Apple, it was unbelievably effective.
Okay, but here's the twist. This was never, ever just a deal between two companies. The whole time, the Chinese government was watching from the sidelines. And they had a much bigger game, a master plan of their own.
So, to really get what China was up to, you need to hear about something called the catfish effect. It's a pretty cool idea. The story goes that fishermen in Norway used to drop a catfish into their tanks of sardines. Why? Because the predator, the catfish, forced the sardines to stay active and alert. It kept them on their toes. So they'd arrive at the market fresh, not mushy. And in this story, Apple was the catfish. And here's the playbook, step by step. Step 1, you invite the biggest, baddest predator on the planet, Apple, right into your tank. Step 2, this move lights a fire under all your local companies, the sardines like Huawei and Xiaomi. They have to scramble, innovate, and just get better to compete. Step 3, all that knowledge and training Apple brought in, it doesn't stay in one place. It spreads like wildfire, and pretty soon you've cultivated your own world-class tech industry. And then comes the final, brilliant move. Step 4, once your own fish are big and strong enough, you remind the catfish who's really in charge of the tank. And by 2013, that's precisely what happened. The game changed. The student was about to become the master. The entire power dynamic between Apple and China was about to be turned completely on its head. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, China's state-run media starts just hammering Apple. They're accusing them of arrogance, picking apart these tiny differences in warranty policies. The message, though, was crystal clear. You operate here because we let you operate here. And you know what? The pressure campaign worked. In a move that absolutely shocked the business world, CEO Tim Cook came out and issued a formal, really long apology in Chinese. Fast forward a few years, and he's taking a secret trip to Beijing. He had to make a deal.
And wow, what a deal it was. Leaked documents later showed that Apple had secretly promised to invest, wait for it, $275 billion into China over just 5 years. And this money wasn't just for making more iPhones. No, this was a pledge to help build up China's own tech companies, to work with their universities to train even more workers. The tables had turned. Apple was now literally paying to stay.
So that brings us right up to today, and you have to be asking yourself, why? Why would the most powerful company on the planet agree to something like that? The simple answer is, they had no choice. By this point, Apple was completely trapped by the incredible ecosystem they themselves had built. They were wearing a beautiful, but very tight pair of golden handcuffs.
I mean, just look at these numbers. An estimated 90% of all Apple products are put together in China. It's not just some country on a list of manufacturing locations. For Apple, it is the location. It's the center of their entire physical universe.
And we're not just talking about the final assembly either. The whole supply chain is there. Out of Apple's 187 most critical suppliers, 150 of them are in China. Think about that. That's a deep level of integration that you just can't pack up and move somewhere else. It's basically impossible.
You want to know how impossible? Okay, some analysts have run the numbers, and they figure if Apple tried to make the iPhone from scratch, entirely in the United States, the price tag on that phone could be something like $3,500. The system they built in China, the efficiency, the sheer scale, it is, for all practical purposes, irreplaceable.
So now Apple is caught in this impossible squeeze. On one side, you have Washington, pressuring one of America's crown jewels to decouple from a major strategic rival. But on the other side, you have Beijing, and they're holding the keys to the entire manufacturing kingdom that Apple spent 2 decades and hundreds of billions of dollars to build. They're stuck.
And that brings the whole story full circle, doesn't it? The very same country that saved Apple from going bankrupt, the country that made its rise to the most valuable company on Earth possible, has now become the single biggest threat to its entire future.
So that leaves us with this final, really tough question. It's not just for Apple, but for so many companies out there. When the thing that made you powerful, your greatest strength, suddenly becomes your biggest vulnerability, what do you do next? What's the move?